Hello, good evening all.
Hi, everybody.
So I don't know how many of you have been following the Roald Dahl controversy. I found it interesting. So let me share with you some recent headlines. Where are we? There it is. This was about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, from The Guardian. Roald Dahl books rewritten to remove language deemed offensive. I'm not going to share the entire article with you, but you all remember reading those books out of yourselves or to the children. And Augustus Gloop is not enormous instead of fat, which is a bad word. It's a cancelled word. Mrs. Twith is no longer ugly, and Oompa Loompas are gender neutral. They're just people. They no longer are men, I think they used to be, or boys, or whatever they were. So that was on the 18th of last month, just a couple of days ago, after the intervention of none other than the Queen of England, or what is she called, the Queen Consort, Camilla. The book editors will no longer appear in all books. You'll have the option of getting the classic Roald Dahl or the other one. So he was uncancelled, it appears. But that's the kind of society we're living in, is this whole idea of cancellations a Jewish concept? Is it something that we do? It would appear that it is, very un-Jewish, except for one instance. The special reading that we're going to have this Shabbos, it's Zachor, and at the end of the regular Torah reading, there's a special maftir that is read, and in fact, we're told that it is very important and that people should make every effort because it's fulfillment of a positive mitzvah to be present and to hear as the reading of Zachor is done. Here's the text of Zachor, and that seems to be, let's say, strange, right? So remember what Amalek did to you on the way out of Mitzrayim. He surprised you on the march. You were famished and weary, and cut down your stragglers in your rear. So Amalek, as the Jews were leaving Mitzrayim, Amalek waged war against them. And as a result of that, here is the commandment. When Hashem grants you safety from all your enemies, then you need to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Machot timche, timche Amalek. You need to eradicate the memory of Amalek. Mitachat Hashem. Don't forget that is to do this. There's a positive commandment to blot out the memory of Amalek. And I put it to you, why do we have this mitzvah of, we know what happened. The story of the war of Amalek is in the very end of Beshalach. This is taken, it's a portion called Zachor, it's at the end of a portion called Kitetse, which is in the book of Devarim, right towards the end of the Torah. The actual battle of Amalek you'll find in the end of the portion of Beshalach we read only 3 weeks ago, how he attacked. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim, and Moshe says to Joshua to go out and wage war against him, while Moshe went up to the mountain, and famously he held his hands up, and as long as his hands were held up, and of course the Jews looked up and remembered the direction in which the hands were pointing, then they were victorious. And so it's miraculously, they are able to fight off Amalek, and Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. And then, at that point already, Hashem says to Moshe, make a note of this and hand it out to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. So the initial instruction in the portion of Beshalach, and then repeated again just before the Jews enter the Holy Land at the very end of the Torah portion, Kitetze, in the book of Devarim. Strange that we should be commanded to eradicate Amalek. Amalek, it seems from the description to have been a once-off battle. They came to a desert and they fought. The Jews fought them back. End of story. And yet, of all of our oppressors over the centuries of Jewish history, that's the one. When they were people who did us far more harm, it would appear, than Amalek. So why this commandment? And look at this. Moshe builds an altar, and then he says the following: hand upon the throne of Hashem, Hashem will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages. But now, if you look at the spelling of the throne of God, it is defective, okay? Because the word for throne is kisei, that's a chair. And Hashem, of course, has 4 letters to his name, as you can see here. So the hand is upon the throne of God, and Rashi quotes this. It says case and not the full word kisei. Hashem's name is only half of the tetragrammaton. I always trip on that one. Hashem's 4-letter name, tetra is 4, right? That is the Holy One, blessed be. He swears that his name will not be perfect, no, his throne perfect, until the name of Amalek is entirely blotted out. Now, why Amalek, which is just one of our enemies? Yes, it ends up being a narrative that repeats itself. There's a war of Shaul, who is told to go and wipe out Amalek, and against Agag, and then there's Haman, who's a descendant of Agag, and that's why it's kind of connected with pre-Purim, and that's why this portion is read as an introduction just before the story of Purim. But already right at the beginning of the history of our people, Hashem says, the attack of Amalek is so heinous that we need to actually eradicate Amalek completely. If you look at the history of the Jewish people till then, there is a nation that has probably done far more harm, having subjugated the Jewish people for a period of, it appears, well, they were there 210 years, but it wasn't all slavery, and the really heavy stuff was towards the end. But let's say for a century at least, the Egyptians persecuted our people. By the time Moshe is born, there's already serious persecution with the drowning of the babies and so forth, and they only come out when Moshe Rabbeinu, who is 80 years old, and that's when you have the slavery and the bricks, and we all know the story, and that carried on for generations, for centuries. Amalek is a battle. This is what Hashem tells us about our relationship with the Egyptians. In the same verse where we're told not to despise the Edomite, that's because he's our family. Of course, Edom is not a name for Esav. In the same verse, we're told not to despise the Egyptian because we were strangers in that land. So we have to show gratitude for having been given hospitality, which initially was very kind hospitality when Yosef invited the Jewish people to come down. That was very, very kind hospitality. But once eventually they persecuted us, and yet we have this debt of gratitude which we have to show the Egyptians, and that was persecution that lasted for decades and decades and decades. Amalek is one battle that we know of, and yet this strange instruction to destroy Amalek. Now, it's not a mitzvah we can do today because we don't know where Amalek is. We know where we have members of the, what is it called, the Goy Defense League. Those are Amalekites in every respect. So we have reincarnations of Amalek, in every generation. But we don't know who are Amalekites, so we can't really, fulfill this mitzvah to the letter of the law. We can in the spirit. So let's understand what was the terrible crime. And perhaps the viciousness of the crime can be explained when we understand the total lack of motive. Now, Barbanel tells us that war between nations are fought for a number of reasons, and he lists three. He says fear of attacks. So sometimes you go out to war to defend yourself preemptively. Sometimes it's territorial. You want to conquer, their land and expand your own borders, so you wage war, or you're afraid they're going to come, and do an incursion and remove your land, and that is a reason to go out to war, to expand your borders, or for religious reasons. So, I think little has changed since the Barbanel's days, because if you look back at history, those are really the reasons for war, right through the history books of the world. It's either territorial, mostly territorial, very often many major conflicts around the world are based on religion, or fear of attack and preemptive going out to wage war. None of this applies to Amalek under the circumstances. There is no territorial expansion when they're in the middle of a barren wilderness. There is no fear. The Jews were going nowhere near Amalek, and wasn't part of their plan to conquer that part of the Middle East at all. They were going, further north into what was defined for them, would be defined for them as the boundaries of Israel, and Amalek's territory lies well south of that. So there was no fear, and of course, religion really wasn't a factor. If we look at the verse, let's just find it again here, that describes that battle. So let's just go back and see if we can do that. So here it is, yeah. Yeah. It says, you were tired, and he was, Amalek, undeterred by fear of God. So clearly, a godless nation that is not really scared of Hashem. So, what is the reason why he attacked? And that is precisely what makes this attack of Amalek so grievous, so heinous, and so needing of action on our part. To understand Amalek, we look at that word that describes what he did to you, or did to us on the road. So let's get that back on our screen. But it says that Korcha baderech. Where is that? Not allowed to do that. You stay. He surprised you on the march. The word korcha, roots in Hebrew, kuf and resh. Now, what words can we find in karcha baderech? So the first is the most obvious one, and that's cold, kar. In what way? The sages give the parable of a hot tub, very, very hot. It's boiling. It's a big tub, and everyone's standing around it. And, nobody's brave enough to go in, and people are putting their fingers in and toes in, and nobody's brave enough to actually enter into the tub because the water is so boiling. Eventually, one brave man goes into the tub. Suddenly, the temperature of the water has dropped. The thermometer won't be able to show you that drop of temperature. It may be imperceptible because there's obviously an exchange of body heat and the water that may cool it down slightly. But what happens in the minds and the heads of all the other people who are standing around the hot tub and waiting to go in? If he can do it, so can we. And here are the Jews. They have just left Mitzrayim. Biyad chazakah, bizron etuyah, outstretched hand. They've left in full force. 40 years later, when Joshua sends spies into the land of Mitzrayim, and they end up, in the home of Rachav, where they take refuge with two spies. What does Rachav say to them? We still remember what God did to you when you left Mitzrayim, and we're terrified because it's 40 years later, and you're on your way, and we know you're coming. We're very scared because that memory of what had just happened to Mitzrayim, the destruction of the land, the splitting of the sea, the drowning of the army, that's kind of fresh at that point in everyone's memories, and everyone's kind of, hey, wait, arm's length, let's leave these people to do their own thing in the desert. Let's not go anywhere near them because they're far too frightening, and nobody can touch. Along comes Amalek, and as I explained to you before, with no motive, with no good reason, simply to say, hey, what you're all scared of, don't be afraid. Attacks Amalek. He's beaten in the process, suffers serious losses. But the hot tub is no longer as hot as it was before. Okay. Somebody's been brave enough to do it. Others will try it in the future again. So he's kind of taken the fear and the awe that people had of Klal Yisrael, of Am Yisrael, he's cooled that down. And that's the first interpretation in that word korcha baderech. He cooled you down from the word kar. But the word kuf resh has another interpretation, and that is from the word kari, or impure. It's a word used in Torah when a man is impure due to a discharge. It's called the Baal Keri. So that root of Kuf Resh also signifies impurity. Where the Jews headed? The Jews are headed to Mount Sinai. They've just left the sea, and they're headed to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. And what Amalek wants to do is get in the way, is block their access to Torah. And this is a lesson that we're being told, that when something stands in the way of defiling your relationship with God, if something stands in the way of Torah and of mitzvot for a Jew, if something stands in the path, it's going to be eradicated. So the eradication of Amalek is not, just destroying a people. It's what they stand for. They were there to block the Jews, to defile them, and make them impure and unworthy and unable to receive Torah. And whenever that Yetzer Hara gets a hold of us, grabs us, and tries to get in between, where we stand and the path of Torah, and blocks us, so that's the ways of Amalek, and that's something which must be totally and completely eradicated. And then we have a third interpretation of that word. And that is also from the word kuf and resh, but kara. What happened? Kara happened. That is, Amalek represents and they're all linked, all through interpretations. The attitude that things just happen, that there's no real design, that there's no cause and effect, that things just happen, and that is a very dangerous approach, which must be totally eradicated. Amalek represents skepticism, and there again we can see all of the meanings coming together as one: coldness, apathy, impurity, and saying that things just happen and that there's no There's no design, and there is no head, no power that runs this world. That's Amalek. And Amalek is guilty of sowing doubt. Amalek is guilty of kind of whenever you experience something, and you get very enthused. Amalek sows doubt in your head, says it just happened, and therefore makes you cold. Sorry, I didn't get to making that last slide, but in the portion of Balak, Amalek is referred to as follows: Reishit Goyim Amalek. Amalek is the head of all the Gentile nations. If you take that, those three words, you take the initial letters, you have Reish, a Gimel, and an Ayin. That spells Rega. What's Rega? Rega is just a minute. Israelis do it like this, Rega, 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 Rega. Don't get excited. Just wait a minute. And that's Amalek coming along and saying, just wait a minute. Okay, don't get excited. Let me sow some doubt. Let me cool you down. Let me remove your enthusiasm. Let me make you apathetic. That's Amalek. And here is one last slide I want to share with you about the gematria of Amalek, which is actually quite powerful. Here he is. That's how I spell Amalek. And if you're familiar with the numerical values, we've got a 10. For Kuf, we got 30, that's Lamed, we got 40 for Mem, and 70 for Ein. Not sure why I'm going left to right, but if you add that, that's 240. And here's the word Safek, which is doubt. Numerical value, 1080 and 60 or 240. Amalek represents that questioning mind that makes you doubt, that turns you apathetic, that tells you that everything is just happenstance, and that there is no real designer of this world with a big D. It's all just happening. And whenever you get enthused, says to you, Rega, just don't get too excited. There's no reason for you to change your life. There's no reason for you to change course. There's no reason for you to really get all excited about the experience you've just been through. Continue life as it was. So that's where we see all of the meanings of the word kar, of coldness, really coming as one. If you can go back to that one, it's right here, I think. Kar for cold, keri for impure, and kara for it just happened. That's what Amalek, with his doubt and with that ability to say about everything, just wait a minute. Don't get excited. Step back and analyze it coldly. That's Amalek. That's the attitude that has to be totally and utterly cancelled, removed, and not be part of the attitude to life. And this is why the nation that represents that attitude is one that has to be totally cancelled. So as un-Jewish as it may seem, and it may not sit with us well at all, particularly in this this day and age where everybody gets cancelled right, left, and center for invalid reasons, mostly. Here we have, this goes on social media, and somebody picks this up. Hashem says to us, an attitude like that, machot timche, forget it, eradicate it, get it out of the world, out of your system. Of course, it's a mitzvah that we can't carry out against the Amalekites now, as I mentioned. So we got to get it out of our system and realize that that's something that we want. So once a year, the shows before Purim, as I mentioned, Amalek's great grandson was Haman. It's called Haman the Agagite because he was the grandson of Agag, king of the Amalekites. That is why we read that portion specifically at this time of year, Shabbat Zachor, and we need to pay attention not just to the literal meaning of the verses, which doesn't apply, but more importantly, to the message that it sends to each of us in terms of how we got to get rid of Amalek within us. Thank you very much.